Fifth Force Segment 3, Behaviors and Contexts. We just finished looking at the enormous impact of fifth forces when they're unmanaged on actually almost everything. Remember Diane Vaughan talked about the fact that it's unfortunate that the social fields that caused the Challenger to explode and caused them to misuse the data are forever invisible and unacknowledged. Let's see how we can make the invisible visible. Now, would you change your behaviors in each of these contexts? Giving or receiving a marriage proposal, the fiancé's family dinner, how about your bachelorette party, or hijacked on your honeymoon? And if you behaved inappropriately to the context, would you be sanctioned? Would you get a kick under the table at the fiancé's dinner, or would you get killed by the hijackers? Something like that's likely, isn't it? So what we just saw is that social context and visible fields drive our behaviors. If I were to put an iron bar in front of you on the table and say, now just use your hands and tell me if this is magnetized or not, could you? No, probably not. What you might do is think back to maybe the third grade where you put a piece of paper on the iron bar, you sprinkled iron filings on it, tap the paper, and now you can see the field lines. Someone could probably even make a guess of the dipole moment of that field. How might you measure invisible social contexts? Well, the clue is right here. You'd measure the behaviors, wouldn't you? Teams and individuals' behaviors. Teams' behavioral norms, individuals' behaviors. Now, which behaviors to measure? So I left, after I put the servicing mission together, I left NASA and took a job as a professor in the business school at the University of Colorado. I was pondering what I could bring to a field that had been so extensively studied that could help to measure these invisible fields. And I thought, well, lots of business school professors presumably have tried to do things like this, but there are two things that differentiate me from these guys. The first is that I've had pretty big jobs in the outside world. I have a very different life experience. Most business school professors have never worked in a business, or at least only for the briefest of periods. Also, I'm a physicist, and you can't study 5 years of undergraduate and 7 years of graduate physics without learning something about it and having it warp your mind in some way. And so I was reflecting on this, and this little voice spoke up and said, the right coordinate system turns an impossible problem to two really hard ones. It must be a coordinate system. So I spent a whole summer trying to build coordinate systems that would illuminate this problem. I had no luck whatever. I tried very complex things with using all the criteria in business books, which give you the 5 things, 6 things, 7 things you're supposed to do. By the way, business books don't work. I never had any behavioral change from that, and I read those books by the droves. You see, here's the problem. The time people usually want leaders, there's some kind of a stressful situation, and I can never remember the 6 things leaders did and do them. So one morning, I'm just about to abandon this effort, and I pick up the local newspaper, and there's a Dilbert cartoon in the comics. And the Dilbert cartoon said, every consultant makes his living with a 2x2 matrix. And I said, aha, I've made this much, much too hard. This is about an simple XY system. At the time, I happened to be reading Carl Jung's book on psychological types, and very interesting book, and said, I got the answer, because, you know, physicists look for something simple. He said, we all build our personality on an innately chosen process, either using intuitive information or sensed information. And we all have a choice that we make. Sorry about the phone. We all have a choice that we make innately about that means from birth, which one to use. And then he said, we all make decisions using 1 or 2 innate preferences, using emotions to decide or logic to decide. And this has fascinated me because I said he's given me 2 very basic parameters, processes, information, and decisions. He's even told me how to label the axes, so let's go play with this and see what we see. So I built this XY axis, which he did not, by the way, and looked at his theory about what he said about people who preferred innately to use intuitive information and emotional deciding. He said they're people that naturally care about other people, and the way they express this is by appreciating other people. So I colored this green because when we appreciate people, we grow them. Here, the next thing is people who prefer emotional deciding and sense information. They're relationally oriented. One thing they tend to do is help people feel included. Now, we all need to feel like we belong. I colored this yellow only because I used up the other primary colors, the things that were a better match. But if you want a mnemonic to remember, you can imagine this yellow flower attracting this monarch butterfly. And then, don't we all need realistic and hopeful futures? That's what people, visions are what people who prefer intuitive information and logical thinking are good at. And don't we all need to know what we and others hold us accountable to do to succeed and have the ability to meet those needs? So I colored this blue, obviously because of blue sky, and the logical color would be red, but red has different meaning in different parts of the world. In Asia and China and Russia, red's good. In the West, it's bad, as in a stoplight. So I picked orange, and the mnemonic you might want to remember it with is how our orange sun organizes the solar system. So what's really profoundly important here is that these are 4 human needs that transcend every country, every race. The need to feel valued, the need to feel we belong, the need for hope, the need for organization. That's why 4D dashboards today are operating in more than 75 countries, and here's a few examples of businesses. Lloyd's Bank in London, Electricity de France's nuclear reactors, Malaysian mines, and million-person shoe factories in China. Now, a guy named Maslow, an American psychologist, some years ago posited that the following is true, and I think it's right. He says we have a needs hierarchy. We can only move to the next level need when the one before it is met. So the base level that we all need is air within minutes, water within 3 days, sleep within days, food you can go quite a long time, and warmth you need only occasionally if you have good clothes. But until those needs are met, you can't think about the next one, which is emotional need number 1, which is to feel secure. Once you feel reasonably secure, your next need is to feel valued. Your next need is to feel included. Your next need is a realistic and hopeful future. And your next need is to meet accountability expectations of yourself and others. So what this is about is each of these has to be met before we can move up. And at the end, we meet all our needs. We become what's called self-actualized, where we realize our full potential in work and life. So let's see what happens when a core need, by the way, these bases are about proportional to the importance of the need roughly. If the need to feel appreciated, for example, is gone, everything else collapses, you lose your potential. This is why the 4D system is so important. You've got to meet all the needs. Let's now explore the connection between authentic appreciation and the context. When you learn to habitually express authentic appreciation, you build a context of mutual respect with open communications. So if I look back at Hubble and Challenger and ask myself what one thing could have been done to prevent those accidents, it would have been to replace all that relentless criticism with mutual respect through authentic appreciation. Then we would have had open communications about what the problems were. Now here's where it gets even more interesting. Everything we design has feedback in it. So when you decide as a person or as a team member to express authentic appreciation, it creates a context where it's easier for others to express authentic appreciation. So these go round and round and round. The next one is to feel included, and these icons are about appropriately sharing power, information, and recognition and rewards. And these people are happy because what happens is if people feel excluded, they feel angry and they act it out. And organizations where people are acting out anger are highly inefficient. This is really an interesting one, this 100% commitment to outcome. This is another way that alters perception, but in an incredibly positive way. So people said to me many times, boy, it must have been hard to put the Hubble servicing mission together. And I didn't even tell you about all the big politicians that were opposed to me doing this. And I said, no, it was the easiest thing I ever did, because I was 100% committed to doing it because of the trauma I and my colleagues had suffered in that event. So watch for this. Psychologists call it the red convertible syndrome. And you probably experienced it if you ever had in your mind a certain car or motorcycle you're thinking about buying. Suddenly the roads are filled with them everywhere. I live in the People's Republic of Boulder, and here in the People's Republic, the national car is the Subaru. My friends had them here when I moved here, and I had a BMW. So I thought as soon as the BMW got a little bit older, I'd go buy a Subaru, and all I ever saw on the highway I noticed were Subarus. Well, I went and drove a Subaru, and if you've been driving a BMW, a Subaru just doesn't cut it. So that was the end of that. So I said, okay, I'm just going to get another BMW and not worry about it. And suddenly I saw BMWs everywhere. We were in Shanghai a couple of years ago, and there's these wonderful World Heritage Gardens outside the city. And my client there was nice enough to get me a car and driver and take us around to go look at these. Well, we did. And even in Beijing, taxi drivers don't like to pick you up if you can't speak Chinese. They'll open the door, the taxi's empty, you'll speak in English or even with a hotel card, and they'll drive off. They don't like to pick up non-Chinese speaking passengers. So the end of the day comes, and I can't find the driver. It's supposed to meet us at 5. It's 5:15. He's nowhere to be seen. And I'm getting anxious because I don't know how we're going to get back to Shanghai. There's no way I'm going to be able to find a bus. And this is not even in a city. This is in the countryside. And I'm looking up and down the road, and he had brought us out in a black Toyota. And I'm saying to myself, isn't it interesting? This is so fascinating. Every car on this road is black. And so I keep looking. After a while, he shows up. And then I noticed the cars went back to being multiple colors again. The effect is so powerful that I only saw black cars and noticed them because that's what I was looking for. So play with this in your own life. And then finally, roles, accountability, and authority. The trump card here is accountability. We all need to know what we're accountable for. If you can figure that out in your work and life and then go meet it, you'll have a happy and successful life. So I want to go back to a metaphor and again show you how powerful these methods are. Suppose it was beneficial to align some iron filings or ferromagnetic particles, just like it's beneficial to align your teammates. Would you use a tweezer and do it one at a time, or would you use a coil and a battery and put a field in it and line them all at once? This is exactly analogous to how development work that I was involved in. When I was at NASA, I went off to, as an individual, to events with unassociated people and brought almost none of it back to the context because stuff doesn't travel easily. If you use these methods, you'll change the local field of the team or the field you create around you. By the way, I want to give you a definition of a team because it's not your conventional definition. A team is a group of people under a leader's influence interacting sufficiently to develop common behavioral norms. There's no need for anyone to be doing a common task. The only need is that you're interacting enough to develop common behavioral norms, just like you would interact in another social setting. That wraps up number 3. Thank you very much, and we'll take a break. Bye-bye.